You know, I feel for people. I made this because my heart loves big. I'm not going to push any products or try to sell anything or pitch anything. I just want to help because I know what it's like to live like there's no meaning, to just feel like you exist, like you're just taking up oxygen, like life is just rinse, wash, repeat, like there should be something more, but you don't know what it is. You can't put your finger on it. You're missing something. You know, maybe you know someone, or maybe it's you that needs this help. You see, I was depressed. I was stuck in a rut. I had zero success with the opposite sex. I had zero success in a career. I had no fulfillment in friends, or even my own self-worth. I was making decent money, but I was blowing through it quickly, just killing time to find joy in at least the bottom of a bottle or the end of a blunt. You know, I've been to rehab in my past for drug abuse. I've done it all. Cocaine, oxys, meth, heroin, ecstasy, whatever, you name it, I've done it. I hated sobriety. I was also empty in those altered states. Come downs, they suck. They're not fun. They're extremely depressing. Things are different now. Without treatment, without doctors, without counselors or AA meetings or any of that, I was able to change my life and clean up for good. Every relationship I cultivate has meaning now. I have worth in my work again. I'm able to look myself in the mirror daily and be content with myself and life again. I have worth in myself again. I have self-worth. I definitely don't feel like an accident. It's real, true freedom. We have all heard that the truth will set us free. I'm only here to present you with the truth that set me free. I know at first you may ask yourself, how is this stuff going to help me? I just say, keep watching all the way to the very end. You know, a new outlook on life requires new eyes, a new perspective. And real eyes realize, they say. So if the truth sets us free, then we must first expose the lies to know what truth is. Just keep an open mind. I'm positive you're not here by accident. I'm positive things will click. Some of this stuff you might already know, maybe not. But just watch to the very end. And I pray this blesses you or your loved ones. I look forward to seeing you on the other side. I love you.
And the message that I am bringing you is clear. It is concise, and there can be no mistake in its interpretation. You must wake up now or be enslaved. The war has begun many years ago. The war was declared by our enemies upon us. You had better listen.
Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life, that there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. The Matrix is everywhere. It is all around us. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth. What truth? That you are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage. born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison for your mind.
On the back of the dollar bill, you'll see the symbol on the left-hand side of the bill, which is Annuit Coeptus, which means our enterprise is now a success, or our enterprise is crowned with success. Annuit Coeptus. So you're saying, fine, so you have an enterprise and is now crowned with success. What enterprise are you talking about? Novus Ordo Seclorum. Novus is novus, meaning new. Ordo is order, and Seclorum is where we get the word secular, meaning the world. So it's new order of the world, the new world order.
Am I understood?
Yes, Your Highness.
Far be it for me to question you, Your Highness, but might not the New World Order be better served by approaching the humans with a more benevolent hand?
And suffer further rebel insults? The High Evolutionary is right. They must be crushed! Begin your preparations, my knights. The destiny of the New World Order will be fulfilled.
You will always have a special place in my heart and in the New World Order.
Ghoulish isn't our vampire, Mrs. C.
Maybe you can ask Santa what he saw before he was bitten.
Right. Retrace his steps. Maybe pull a couple of his teeth for DNA samples.
Mandy! I'm getting presents in the New World Order! Mrs. Claus said so!
Now off to the cellar with the lot of you.
Niggas that got killed in the field and all the babies born. No, they ain't fully prepared for this new world order, so I keep it ghetto.
We are slowly being slaughtered, so be prepared for the new world order. Yeah, you can yell out your breath. Gap up all your arms. Get ready for this new world order. Shit is about to change. Just a lullaby to the new world order. Just a
Escaping through this hole that is gaping. This world is mine for the taking. Make me king as we move toward a new world order. A normal life is boring, but superstardom's close to...
What is at stake is more than one small country. It is a big idea, a new world order, where diverse nations are drawn together in common cause to achieve the universal aspirations of mankind.
The world that maybe some people dreamt of at that conference back in Bournemouth, when it looked as if maybe history would end, that liberal democracy would triumph, that free market economics would slowly progress, and we'd have a new world order.
And together they helped to create, were the principal leaders in creating, a new world order and a winning strategy in the Cold War.
We are part of a new world order. And as the recently departed Admiral William J. Crowe once said, it's long on new and it's short on order.
Walter Isaacson wrote a wonderful book about some of the wise men who helped shape the New World Order following the Second World War.
As we devise a way forward in Iraq, I urge the international community to embrace its responsibility for creating that new world order. A new world order based upon collective action.
The transatlantic partnership was never just the foundation of our security. It was the foundation of our way of life. It was forged in experience of the most bitter and anguished kind. Out of it came a new Europe, a new world order, a new consensus as to how life should and could be lived.
New World Order.
(1775), the American Revolutionary War began as the American colonies sought to detach from England and its oppressive monarchy. Though many reasons are cited for the revolution, one in particular sticks out as the prime cause: that King George III of England outlawed the interest-free, independent currency the colonies were producing and using for themselves, in turn forcing them to borrow money from the Central Bank of England at interest, immediately putting the colonies into debt. And, as Benjamin Franklin later wrote, the refusal of King George III to allow the colonies to operate an honest money system which freed the ordinary man from the clutches of the money manipulators was probably the prime cause of the revolution. In 1783, America won its independence from England. However, its battle against the central bank concept and the corrupt, greed-filled men associated with it had just begun. So what is a central bank? A central bank is an institution that produces the currency of an entire nation. Based on historical precedent, two specific powers are inherent in central banking practice: the control of interest rates and the control of the money supply, or inflation. The central bank does not simply supply a government's economy with money, it loans it to them at interest. Then, through the use of increasing and decreasing the supply of money, the central bank regulates the value of the currency being issued. It is critical to understand that the entire structure of this system can only produce one thing in the long run: debt. It doesn't take a lot of ingenuity to figure this scam out. For every single dollar produced by the central bank is loaned at interest. That means every single dollar produced is actually the dollar plus a certain percent of debt based on that dollar. And since the central bank has the monopoly over the production of the currency for the entire country, and they loan each dollar out with immediate debt attached to it, where does the money to pay for the debt come from? It can only come from the central bank again, which means the central bank has to perpetually increase its money supply to temporarily cover the outstanding debt created, which in turn, since that new money is loaned out at interest as well, creates even more debt. The end result of this system without fail is slavery, for it is impossible for the government and thus the public to ever come out of the self-generating debt. The founding fathers of this country were well aware of this. By the early 20th century, the U.S. had already implemented and removed a few central banking systems, which were swindled into place by ruthless banking interests. At this time, the dominant families in the banking and business world were the Rockefellers, the Morgans, the Warburgs, the Rothschilds. And in the early 1900s, they sought to push once again legislation to create another central bank. However, they knew the government and public were very weary of such an institution, so they needed to create an incident to affect public opinion. So, J.P. Morgan, publicly considered a financial luminary at the time, exploited his mass influence by publishing rumors that a prominent bank in New York was insolvent or bankrupt. Morgan knew this would cause mass hysteria, which would affect other banks as well. And it did. The public, in fear of losing their deposits, immediately began mass withdrawals. Consequently, the banks were forced to call in their loans, causing the recipients to sell their property, and thus a spiral of bankruptcies, repossessions, and turmoil emerged. Putting the pieces together a few years later, Frederick Allen of Life magazine wrote, "The Morgan interests took advantage to precipitate the panic, guiding it shrewdly as it progressed." Unaware of the fraud, the Panic of 1907 led to a congressional investigation headed by Senator Nelson Aldrich, who had intimate ties to the banking cartels and later became part of the Rockefeller family through marriage. The commission, led by Aldrich, recommended a central bank should be implemented so a panic like 1907 could never happen again. This was the spark the international bankers needed to initiate their plan. In 1910, a secret meeting was held at a J.P. Morgan estate on Jekyll Island off the coast of Georgia. It was there that the central banking bill called the Federal Reserve Act was written. This legislation was written by bankers, not lawmakers. This meeting was so secretive, so concealed from government and public knowledge that the 10 or so figures who attended disguised their names when en route to the island. After this bill was constructed, it was then handed over to their political frontman, Senator Nelson Aldrich, to push through Congress. And in 1913, with heavy political sponsorship by the bankers, Woodrow Wilson became president, having already agreed to sign the Federal Reserve Act in exchange for campaign support. And 2 days before Christmas, when most of Congress was at home with their families, the Federal Reserve Act was voted in, and Wilson in turn made it law. Years later, Woodrow Wilson wrote, in regret, Congressman Louis McFadden also expressed the truth after the passage of the bill. A world banking system was being set up here, a superstate controlled by international bankers, acting together to enslave the world for their own pleasure. The Fed has usurped the government. Now, the public was told that the Federal Reserve System was an economic stabilizer, and inflation and economic crises were a thing of the past. Well, as history has shown, nothing is further from the truth. The fact is, the international bankers now had a streamlined machine to expand their personal ambitions.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
For example, from 1914 to 1919, the Fed increased the money supply by nearly 100%, resulting in extensive loans to small banks and the public. Then, in 1920, the Fed called in mass percentages of the outstanding money supply, thus resulting in the supporting banks having to call in huge numbers of loans, and, just like 1907, bank runs, bankruptcy, and collapse occurred. Over 5,400 competitive banks outside of the Federal Reserve System collapsed, further consolidating the monopoly of a small group of international bankers. Privy to this crime, Congressman Lindbergh stepped up and said in 1921, "Under the Federal Reserve Act, panics are scientifically created. The present panic is the first scientifically created one, worked out as we figure a mathematical equation." However, the Panic of 1920 was just a warm-up. From 1921 to 1929, the Fed again increased the money supply, resulting once again in extensive loans to the public and banks. There was also a fairly new type of loan called a margin loan in the stock market. Very simply, the margin loan allowed an investor to put down only 10% of a stock's price, with the other 90% being loaned through the broker. In other words, a person could own $1,000 worth of stock with only $100 down. This method was very popular in the roaring 1920s, as everyone seemed to be making money in the market. However, there was a catch to this loan. It could be called in at any time and had to be paid within 24 hours. This is termed a margin call, and the typical result of a margin call is the selling of the stock purchased with the loan. So, a few months before October in 1929, J.D. Rockefeller, Bernard Baruch, and other insiders quietly exited the market. And on October 24, 1929, the New York financiers who furnished the margin loans started calling them in masse. This sparked an instantaneous, massive sell-off in the market, for everyone had to cover the margin loans. It then triggered mass bank runs for the same reason, in turn collapsing over 16,000 banks, enabling the conspiring international bankers to not only buy up rival banks at a discount, but to also buy up whole corporations at pennies on the dollar. It was the greatest robbery in American history. But that didn't stop there. Rather than expanding the money supply in order to recover from this economic collapse, the Fed actually contracted it, fueling one of the largest depressions in history. Once again outraged, Congressman Louis McFadden, a longtime opponent of the banking cartels, began bringing impeachment proceedings against the Federal Reserve Board, saying of the crash and depression, it was a carefully contrived occurrence. International bankers sought to bring about a condition of despair so that they might emerge the rulers of us all. Not surprisingly, and after 2 previous assassination attempts, McFadden was poisoned at a banquet before he could push for the impeachment. Now, having reduced the society to squalor, the Federal Reserve bankers decided that the gold standard should be removed. In order to do this, they needed to acquire the remaining gold in the system. So, under the pretense of helping to end the Depression, came the 1933 gold seizure. Under the threat of imprisonment for 10 years, everyone in America was required to turn in all gold bullion to the Treasury, essentially robbing the public of what little wealth they had left. And at the end of 1933, the gold standard was abolished. If you look at a dollar bill from before 1933, it says it is redeemable in gold. You look at a dollar bill today, it says it is legal tender, which means it is backed by absolutely nothing. It is worthless paper. The only thing that gives our money value is how much of it is in circulation. Therefore, the power to regulate the money supply is also the power to regulate its value, which is also the power to bring entire economies and societies to its knees.
In order to create the central bank, certain obstacles had to be overcome. First, those opposed to a central bank would need to be removed, and secondly, the law would need to be changed, or simply appear to be changed. To deal with the troublesome individuals who opposed a central bank, the Jesuits spared no expense. They built a ship of death called the Titanic.
The sinking of the Titanic was a design of the Jesuit order to get rid of the opposition to the creation of a central bank in the United States.
And the men on the Titanic were opposed to a central bank. They had to die. Among those were John Jacob Astor, Isidor Straus, Benjamin Guggenheim, and a host of other millionaires who were opposed to a central bank in America. Therefore, they had to be taken out of the way. And they were on the Titanic.
The company building the ship was owned by J.P. Morgan, who was himself an agent of the Rothschilds family, the Rothschilds being the bankers for the Pope and the Vatican. The main Jesuit targets were brought on board. The captain of the ship was Edward John Smith. It appears from his actions that Captain Smith was a Jesuit coadjutor, that is, a Jesuit who has taken the oath but does not wear the robes. A coadjutor blends into the scenery and never looks like a Jesuit priest. It is a veteran sea captain, Edward Smith, who orders the ship to travel through an 80-square-mile ice field at full speed on a moonless night. There had been over 8 telegrams warning the captain of the danger.
He's warned 8 times, slow the ship down, slow the Titanic down, you're going too fast. Not once stopped. Knew there was an iceberg field up ahead, knew that he should have slowed down, but didn't. And so you look and you say, how was it that this man could go headlong into a field of icebergs and not slow the ship down, not be more careful? The only conclusion you can draw is, as a coadjutor of the Jesuit order, right through the line, the chain of command, he was told, sink the ship. And he did. On board the Titanic, and this is all documented in a National Geographic video that was put out in 1986. You can go to your local library and they'll either have it on hand or they can, get it on library loan. But on that videotape, it shows that as the Titanic was coming up along the coast of England, it had various stops. And at one stop, a Jesuit priest got on board. His name was Francis Brown. Francis Brown got on board the Titanic, took pictures of all of the wealthy people, took pictures of Edward Smith, the captain, and then, just before the Titanic set sail across the Atlantic, Francis Brown got off. And then, of course, the Titanic sunk.
Well, Francis Brown is given a camera by his bishop, by his uncle, the bishop, and he is told to go down and take all these pictures of all these people we're going to kill in first class. And so that's what he does. He takes picture of all these rich people, everybody that's there is going to go down, and a rich passenger offers him passage. Well, he knows the ship's going to go down, but he very sheepishly got in contact with his provincial. And the provincial's message was, get off that ship.
Like Brown, another noted passenger, Jesuit agent J.P. Morgan, did not make the ill-fated sea voyage. Even though booked on the ship for passage to America, Morgan also fortuitously canceled at the last minute.
Of course, J.P. Morgan, he had his own suite reserved for him. And there were some 55 men who at the last minute canceled their reservations on the Titanic. J.P. Morgan was one of them. Said he was sick. Oh, by the way, and don't load any of my art treasures on the Titanic either. So he didn't have any of his art treasures on it either. Didn't lose any of that.
How do we know there was foul play involved with the Titanic? When the iceberg was sighted, it was First Officer Murdoch who attempted to port around the deadly object. This was sound enough, but Murdoch also ordered the engines into reverse. Author Win Wade asked the obvious question. As long as Murdoch was trying to veer out of the iceberg's way, why had he jammed on the brakes, so to speak, by throwing the engines full speed astern? In point of fact, the 1910 edition of Knight's Modern Seamanship clearly contradicted Murdoch's decision. The instructions are clear. Avoid reversing the engines. Wade sums up the situation by saying, Murdoch had maneuvered in a manner more likely to cause collisions than to prevent them. As with many who investigated the Titanic disaster, author Win Wade was at a loss to explain Murdoch's actions in going against the book. But the captain and Murdoch's actions were not the only telltale signs of treachery on the night the Titanic sank.
We see all sorts of anomalies on the Titanic. For example, when it was sinking, the emergency flares were to be red, so that ships in those lanes could see the Titanic was in trouble. Well, someone had taken away the red flares and replaced them with white flares, making it look like we were shooting off flares and having a party. And then the loading of the boats, we know that was a fraud. They didn't allow the lifeboats to be completely loaded. They were only half loaded, some 1/3 loaded, because the targets in the first class could not be allowed to board. And the Jesuits were not only the captain, but his officers, and there had been a strike in England at the time, and the men who were normally the ones who would man the ocean liners, they were replaced by Jesuit coadjutors ready to board because they were all under oath to die for the Black Pope if necessary, and so they did carry out the sinking of the Titanic.
But how is it possible that men will commit suicide as Captain Smith and some of his hand-picked crew obviously did?
We have to understand that these men have died to their own self-will. And so they have completely been emptied of their own personalities, and upon the order of their commander will do exactly what they're told. There's no such thing as a disobedient Jesuit. This serves as a warning to all the other men of power, not only in our country, but in England and Europe. You mess with us, and we're going to do to you what we did to all those people on Titanic, and we're going to thwart the investigation. because a subsequent investigation of the sinking of Titanic blamed Bruce Ismay, the right-hand man of J.P. Morgan, and Captain Lord of England. They were the scapegoats, when they could have easily blamed the men of power at that time. Saw who canceled their reservations. It was a Warren Commission all over again. 9/11 Commission all over again. It's a whitewash and cover-up, and that cover-up is even more powerful than the murder itself.
After many of the leading opponents to a central bank had been removed, the Jesuits moved to obtain passage of the 16th Amendment and the Federal Reserve Act, both in 1913.
So they created the Federal Reserve Bank to finance their crusades. Without the Federal Reserve Bank, there's no war in Iraq. Without the Federal Reserve Bank, there's no World War II. There's no World War I. And there's a book written by Katz called The Money Changers, and in it he says that it's the Federal Reserve Bank and the creators of all this paper currency, fiat money, credit out of thin air. Without that, you don't have these wars. So they needed the Federal Reserve Bank to create wars on heretic and liberal peoples in Europe so that they could restore the Pope's temporal power throughout the European nations that was being thrown off in the 1800s.
They create money out of nothing. What a scam. They have so much money, they don't care about money. All they care about is power. All they care about is being able to control the political situation so it goes their way.
After a man has far more money than he possibly can spend for pleasures, what is left to excite him? For those with a ruling class mentality, the answer is power, raw power over other human beings. Money can buy such power only to a point. Beyond that, politics is the sport, and world politics is the ultimate game.
If you haven't heard of the Bilderbergers, it's for one reason only. They haven't wanted you to. At their annual closed-door meetings, no outsiders are allowed even close to the building. Here are gathered the most powerful individuals of the Western world, united regularly at club meetings. Yet nothing is reported by the New York Times, the Washington Post, or the LA Times.
What really fascinates me is the complete blackout in the American press. For more than 20 years, I've gone down to the press club every day. I check the wires in their library, mingle with other paper boys, and I asked them the question many times, why, when if 120 film stars or 120 NFL football players met behind locked and guarded doors at a remote location for 3 days, you'd try very hard to penetrate and find out what those movie stars or football players are doing. Well, I had no curiosity at all when 120 of the world's most powerful financial leaders and political leaders meet for 3 days in a remote location behind armed guards in a complete blackout. Well, I had no curiosity.
The people who call conspiracy theorists are not the conspiracy theorists themselves. We're talking about facts here. The Bilderberg Group does exist. The Federal Reserve does exist. The people who are members of the Bilderberg Group are also the people who do control the Federal Reserve. These are all facts.
In 1954, the elite of the planet met in secret at the Bilderberg Hotel in Oosterbeek, Holland. The Bilderberg Group would later admit that their mission was the formation of the EU. Once the EU was established, under the guise of trade deals, a North American Union and Asian Union would be formed. The three interlocking superstates formed the core of the global government, while the United Nations would serve as a world regulatory and enforcement body over the Third World subregions. The Bilderberg Group consists of the heads of all of the managing roundtable groups that steer individual countries. Picture the elite power structure of the world as a giant pyramid, with only the elite of the elite at the tip top of the capstone. The group has been so secretive that until the mid-1980s, the controlled corporate media denied its existence. Into the late 1990s, coverage only consisted of rare one-line mentions. With the rise of the alternative media, their stranglehold on information has begun to slip.
What we do hear coming out of those meetings is incredible about the plans of the New World Order to consolidate power. Political power and economic power coming together at the highest level. But what I call the lapdog media, the control media in this country, you would think that they would be going to court, crying freedom of information, open meetings, sunshine law, and all of these things, but the silence is deafening.
Why is it the major media would deny this? Let's look at the ownership of the major media. Let's look at the roster of, say, the Bilderberg meeting. Katharine Graham owns the Washington Post. Katharine Graham has been to the Bilderbergers. Conrad Black, one of the largest media barons in Canada and Europe, has not only been to these meetings, but he has hosted the meeting just a few years ago.
Every year they meet in secret, and there is an absolute news blackout. There is never anything reported in any of those papers.
David Rockefeller himself thanked the media for keeping this all hushed up.
Leah Prince, you've heard of the golden rule, haven't you? Whoever has the gold makes the rules.
The way that this can be done with a very few people, at the peak, that is because if you look at every organization today, be it a university, a school, a government, a secret society, anything, a multinational company, business of any kind, they're structured as a pyramid, which works like this. In any organization, you've got a very, very few people at the peak of the pyramid. That very few people know exactly what that organization's about, what its real agenda is, what it's really trying to achieve. The further you come down from that peak in any organization, you're meeting more and more and more people who know less and less and less and less about what the organization's really about. They only know their part. The CIA call this compartmentalization, keeping from everyone else in the pyramid how what they're doing in apparent innocence links in with what other people are doing in apparent innocence to produce a very sinister pattern. The Freemasons are a classic example of this. When you say that the Freemason secret society is involved, people think that you must be saying that every Freemason wants to manipulate the world to global dictatorship. Utterly ridiculous. Of course they don't. But if you look at the Freemason structure, the vast overwhelming majority of Freemasons in the world, they never get higher than the bottom 3 levels of degree, the overwhelming majority. But in the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, which pervades much of world politics, particularly in America and other areas, there's another 30 degrees above that to the 33rd degree, which the vast majority of Freemasons never get near. And there's another 13 levels not officially accepted to exist, which some people call Illuminati degrees, which at that level, the Freemason secret society is in a different universe to the part where the vast majority of Freemasons exist right down here. Compartmentalization. This is how it works. So every one of these institutions that control the direction of the world and our daily lives is a pyramid. The banking system is a pyramid. You go into the local bank, the person you meet across the counter won't even know what's going on in the bank manager's office behind them, let alone what's going on at board level and higher. So the banking system is a pyramid going to a peak. The intelligence agency network in the world is a pyramid going to a peak. The multinational company network is a pyramid. So is the global media and so on. And there is a global pyramid within which all these work, in which the peaks of all these individual pyramids, banking, business, media, etc., fuse into one peak. And up there, it's speculated by many people, there perhaps may be no more than 13 families, 13 people at the peak, pervading down through these different levels the same basic policy, which is pushing the world towards more and more centralization of power. There is this like cozy little myth that is perpetuated between politicians and the media. Politicians walk the world stage as if they are the final arbiters of power in the world. So when a president speaks, the cameras run and it's flashed around the world, prime ministers and such like. The media report the world as if presidents and prime ministers are the final arbiters and decision makers in the world, which means that the people above the level of presidents and prime ministers that really make the decisions, they're never looked at or exposed by the mainstream media because they're not accepted to exist.
Well, I was in the FBI for 27.5 years, and at the time of my retirement in 1979, I was the senior special agent in charge of the FBI Los Angeles office. I developed information personally about just extensive corruption in the government, not only at the federal level, but all the way down to the city and state level across this country. I have information about corrupt judges, corrupt law enforcement, prosecutors, county officials, judges. It involves drugs, involves pornography, involves prostitution, it involves cults, pedophilia. The bottom line is to take over the country and the world.
For what, though?
Power, greed. This goes back over 200 years, back to 1776, with the establishment of an organization known as the Illuminati. And if your listeners don't know what the Illuminati is, they need to run down to the library and look it up and do some research, because on May the 1st, 1776, a fellow named Adam Weishaupt, German, set forth 25 goals at the request of the Rothschild group that they needed to initiate in order to take over the world. We're talking about destroy the sovereignty of countries and destroy religions. And that's where it really started in modern day. And right today, believe it or not, and we have the documentation for this, we are probably 90%, their goals have probably been filled at the great rate of about 90%.
This Illuminati, this group who called themselves the Enlightened Ones, had gained positions of power through control of the banking system.
The Illuminati was founded on May 1st, 1776, by Adam Weishaupt, a professor at Ingolstadt University. Weishaupt obviously had been a serious student of the occult, for many of its bizarre features and symbols were incorporated into his organization. Weishaupt had been active in the Masonic lodges of Germany, and found in them the perfect vehicle for recruiting into his secret order, which he described publicly as the highest level of Freemasonry. The Illuminati was formally incorporated into the Masonic lodges at the Congress of Wilhelmsbad in 1780. There were 8 conspiratorial rings within rings, advancing from the outermost novice inward to Rex, or king. The king, of course, was Weishaupt himself, who had adopted the code name Spartacus. Those in the outer rings were told that the grand purpose of the order was to make of the human race, without any distinction of nation, condition, or profession, one good and happy family. But by the time the member had advanced to the level of presbyter, or priest, his oath of absolute secrecy and obedience had become deadly serious. Only then was he allowed finally to see the ultimate goal of the order. It was the destruction of all religion and the destruction of all independent governments, replaced by a new world order, a world government ruled from behind the scenes by the illuminated ones.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
I call upon all states to join ranks
in order to found the new world order of the 21st century.
And people talked then, in 1990, of a new world order. What they actually meant then was a new political order. And the question for us is how we meet and master all these challenges to ensure that Britain enhances its competitiveness in the process and realizes what I believe is our destiny of success in this new world order. So, in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, a new world is emerging. It is a new world order with significantly different and radically new challenges for the future.
On the back of the dollar bill, you see the symbol on the left-hand side of the bill, which is Annuit Coeptis, which means our enterprise is now a success, or our enterprise is crowned with success. Annuit Coeptis. So you say, fine, so you have an enterprise and is now crowned with success. What enterprise are you talking about? Novus ordo seclorum. Novus is novus, meaning new. Ordo is order, and seclorum is where we get the word secular, meaning the world. So it's new order of the world, the new world order. George Bush's new world order is now a success.
Bill, you've heard an awful lot of dramatic speeches and seen dramatic moments in times of great gravity for the nation. How would you assess this evening?
This was a stirring address, in my view, shorter than his father's speech when he announced the New World Order, shorter than his father's speech when he announced the New World Order.
1934 is when the Federal Reserve actually finally took total control of the United States monetary system, and that's when they said it is now a success, because this is a symbol, this is an emblem of a secret society of Freemasons called the Illuminati, the German Bavarian Illuminati. They were a secret society founded in the south of Germany. They were called the Illuminati, the illuminated ones, the enlightened ones. 1776 was when this secret society actually formed itself into a secret society and put itself into operation. They were the basis for what we call today in our country the Bavarian Illuminati was the basis for what we call today the Colombian faction. The Colombian faction of the Illuminati came here right after this government was formed, and that's where we get today Columbia Space Shuttle, Columbia Movies, Columbia Television, Columbia Records, everything, Columbia University. As a matter of fact, Columbia TV, Columbia Broadcasting System, CBS. What is the symbol for CBS? It's the all-seeing eye. And that's why our government is in the District of Columbia, because these guys own our government. They print our money, and they own not only the government, but they own you. You are their property. So, in other words, these guys print the money, they run the country, and they own you, and they own everything around it. And so they make the laws, and that's why they can decide who can kill who and who can get away with who and who can get away with whatever, because they make the laws and they decide, all right? As I said to you before, there are 13 layers in this pyramid. There are 13 letters in Annuit Coeptis, but 13 is a very important number to this secret society. There are 13 stripes. There are 13 stars here, which make up the Star of David. The 13 berries, there are 13 leaves, 13 arrows. There are 32 feathers here and 33 feathers there. Everything is done in a sequence of 13. 13, of course, is based on, this is what we call Masonic symbolism. Freemasons designed this dollar bill. Everything is done in a sequence of 13, and again, I draw your attention to the fact that you have 13 stars here, which collectively make up the Star of David. There's a reason why. On the $1 bill at the top, you'll see this little image right here, but if you blow it up from an actual photograph, you'll see it is it's a little owl. It's a symbol of the Bohemian Society. The Bohemian Society meets in California on the last 2 weeks of July of every year. I have pictures showing all of the presidents, all of the living presidents, excluding the new one, but all of the living presidents at Bohemian Grove in Northern California, and they're all wearing red and black Ku Klux Klan dress type of regalia, like the Ku Klux Klanners, with the pointed headdress and everything. And I mean, that's quite a sight to see presidents dressed like Ku Klux Klan members, right? And they're standing in front of a big open pit of fire, and behind them is about a 20 to 25 foot owl behind them. And the article in Elm magazine and Time magazine, I've got 2 or 3 different magazines showing basically the same pictures. It says that the presidents meet with all of the heads of industry throughout the world, all of the heads of state throughout the world, and all of the most important wheeler dealers in this country, and they all meet up in Northern California, and they have rituals where they go before the owl after midnight. And what a picture you got, with all the presidents dressed up like Ku Klux Klanners with black and red robes on before an owl. And these are your presidents of this country. And the reason why they chose the owl is because the owl is a symbol used in Europe by secret societies, because the owl is wise, because it sees things in the dark. And the implication is, of course, that's why they are where they are, because they're very brilliant and they know things that you don't know.
Our story begins in Northern California over 100 years ago, when locals began to spread rumors of bizarre occult rituals being conducted in the ancient redwood groves of Sonoma County. As the decades passed, it became clear these incredible stories had a basis in truth, and their source was a 2,700-acre private club known as the Bohemian Grove. Then, in a time period between the mid-1970s and the early 1990s, scores of reporters attempted to infiltrate the Grove. All attempts were unsuccessful. Grove security identified them, threw them out for trespassing, or in some cases, had the local police arrest them. To many, it seemed the Grove's secrets would never become public. All of that changed on July 15th, 2000, when we ripped aside the veil of secrecy and were successfully able to penetrate the Bohemian Grove on their high holy day and videotape the cremation of care ritual. Our infiltration is chronicled in my documentary film, Dark Secrets Inside Bohemian Grove. As the news spread across the planet that the Bohemian Grove had been blown wide open and that their secrets were public, the people were amazed. They were amazed to learn that many U.S. presidents and British prime ministers, German chancellors, the Hollywood elite, the heads of business and academia, Federal Reserve chairmen, were traveling to the Grove each year, and that presidents had been going there since the turn of the last century in 1900. They were shocked by each new revelation of ritualistic depravity.
When will you learn? Wow. Great son of all mortal wisdom, Owl of Bohemia, we beseech thee, grant us thy counsel.
One last question. I read a Washington Times article many years ago where you had a comment about the organization, and then now it's been in the Wall Street Journal, it's been in a lot of different newspapers, and that's the Bohemian Grove. And back in, 1996, when you joined as a Clinton advisor, the Republicans were criticizing you, oh, what about Bohemian Grove? And then you countered them by saying, hey, I don't run around in the woods naked. What did that mean?
Here is the before-mentioned Washington Times article where he said, I didn't run around naked like they do.
I don't know what quote you're referring to. I'm not aware of any quote like that. Listen, I am a happy member of the Bohemian Grove. I like the folks who come there, and it's really inappropriate for me to talk about the group beyond that. Thank you.
Have you been there for the ceremony with the cremation of care?
Frankly, I don't think that's something I need to talk to you about.
Really?
That's right.
Well, I'm Alex Jones, and I snuck in there in 2000. I'm the guy that blew it wide open and got the video, and it's been on national TV.
Well, I disrespect you for that.
You do?
I do.
But it's a lot of big public officials going in there. Don't we deserve to know?
You took an, I don't know anything about you, and I don't know anything about your film, but if you go in there with an understanding, you violated that understanding by releasing that film, and I don't respect you for that.
Really? But we have public officials
I'm sorry, you took an understanding when you went in there that you would not do that film, and did you have an understanding when you went in there?
No.
Did you crash it?
Yes.
Yeah, and it has no trespassing signs there too, doesn't it?
No, they put them up after.
Oh, I'm
I
sorry.
just walked in.
I'm sorry, sir. I've been there before. I know what the circumstances are, and I'm sorry you violated the understandings. That was not a gentlemanly thing to do.
But what about the ritual? Is the ritual genuinely?
Sir, everything. I don't owe you this comment.
I know. I appreciate it.
This is what's called ambush journalism, and I disrespect you for that as well. So thank you
ever
and goodbye.
been in the ritual?
It's none of your damn business.
Oh.
That's right. Listen. You go around and make understandings with people and violate them. You ambush people on the streets, and that's inappropriate form of journalism. If you wish to practice that, that's fine, but don't ask others to respect you for it. If you want to, you can do. You're a free American, like anything you want. If you want to be uncivil and rude and ungentlemanly, that's up to you. But don't expect the rest of us to say, "Oh well, you're
there, Mr. Gergen."
I'm sorry, nobody sets policy in there. We try to be gentlemen, and obviously, you don't belong there.
Weaving spiders come out here. Yeah, that is a three-pointer. Woo!
Look how strangely he behaved when we brought it up. Why is he acting so secretive? And why did he get so angry when he discovered that we'd snuck in? You see, they take it very, very seriously. This is one of the hallmarks of the occult and secret societies. The word occult means secret. Secrecy is part of their religion. They revel in it. And when it's violated, they become extremely angry. Our social lives, going to the football game or the PTA, a little bit different than your average world leader or corporation chief. No, in their spare time, they worship Moloch and do mock human sacrifices. We just need to get used to that and accept them as our leaders. Think about it. If your neighbor was engaging in mock human sacrifices to Moloch, the demon idol that was worshipped all over the Mediterranean and the Middle East, would you let that neighbor walk your dog or house sit, or how about babysit your children, or be in control of the nuclear launch codes? Well, let me give you a revelation. They are in control of the national deficit, of Congress, of your bank account, of your local police department, and they see you as cattle, as their slaves.
Let's begin by going over some background, how it started. John Podesta clicked on a phishing scam email sent to him by hackers and unwittingly handed over his password to them. The hackers then handed over Podesta's emails to WikiLeaks, and they verified their authenticity before releasing them in the run-up to the 2016 US election. Who is John Podesta? John Podesta was Hillary Clinton's head of campaign during this 2016 election. He also worked closely with President Barack Obama and President Bill Clinton during their times in office. His brother, Tony Podesta, who was also involved in this scandal, was recently listed as one of Washington, D.C.'s most powerful people by GQ magazine. And here you see John Podesta with Hillary Clinton, with the Pope, with Bill Clinton, and with Obama. He's clearly someone who has a lot of influence in the political world. What happened next? Volunteers on Twitter, Reddit, and 4chan sifted through emails and uncovered some emails that looked suspicious. First signs of the suspicious activity were emails that appeared to contain some kind of code relating to pizza and other food items. Things blew up when the infamous spirit cooking email from Marina Abramovich to Tony Podesta was uncovered. Let's take a look at the code in the emails. The code appears to be hot dog equals boy, pizza equals girl, cheese equals little girl, pasta equals little boy, ice cream equals male prostitute, walnuts or nuts equals person of color, map equals semen and source equals orgy. Here's a quote from one of the emails. The realtor found a handkerchief. I think it has a map that seems pizza related. So this is one of the very strange emails that appears to be coded and which first got us curious about what on earth they were talking about. And it's from Susan Sandler to John Podesta, and you can see the WikiLeaks email number at the bottom there, so you can go and look it up if you want. Do you think I'll do better playing dominoes on cheese than on pasta? Another email sent from someone from the Sandler Foundation to John Podesta in the WikiLeaks email 50332. So again, this appears to be some kind of code. I mean, would you ever say anything like this to anyone you know? Do you think I'll do better playing dominoes on cheese than on pasta? And it appears that the word dominoes perhaps means something like BDSM that involves domination. That's what we're speculating. So again, cheese means little girl and pasta means little boy. Another email, Obama spent about $65,000 flying in pizza/dogs from Chicago for a private party at the White House. When you start thinking about this doesn't make any sense at all. Who on earth would fly in pizza and hot dogs from another state? Who on earth would spend $65,000 on pizza and hot dogs? And why on earth would Obama be feeding his guests pizza and hot dogs? Wouldn't they have some kind of way fancier food that can be prepared by chefs and things there? And apparently they don't import food into the White House anyway because it's a security risk. All of the food is prepared on site. So again, it does appear to be code words. Why would this even be a topic of interest in email? And if you do a search and look this email up, you'll also find that the response seemed to imply prostitution. So it does appear that these are code words. I will be sacrificing a chicken in the backyard to Moloch. Cheryl Mills emailed this to Hillary Clinton. So what's a chicken code word for? Well, in gay slang, chicken is code word for an underage boy, and Moloch is the god associated with child sacrifice. So go figure. I will be sacrificing a chicken in the backyard to Moloch. These are the kind of weird emails that first got us asking questions when we were digging through WikiLeaks. So, talking about Satanism, this brings us to Marina Abramovich's invitation that she sent to Tony Podesta. So who is Marina Abramovich? She calls herself a performance artist. She's close to many celebrities and politicians. Ex-Satanists and occult experts have stated that her work is clearly inspired by Luciferian worship and Aleister Crowley, a famous Satanist's work. Her spirit cooking recipes involve consuming concoctions of bodily fluids. This is the woman who invited Tony Podesta and John Podesta and their wives to her house to take part in spirit cooking via email. So this is the guy who runs Comet Ping Pong. He's considered one of the 50 most powerful people in Washington. Interestingly, GQ also listed Heather and Tony Podesta in this list, and Hillary Clinton in this list. So here's James Alefantis of Comet Ping Pong and Tony Podesta at a party. They're obviously pretty close. And here's some information about this one called Comet Ping Pong, which is also on the same street, just a couple of doors down from Besta Pizza. So it's located in Washington, D.C. It's owned by Big Cheese, LLC. Remember, cheese is a code word. Big and little is indicative of this pedophile code. Obama held a fundraiser there, as confirmed by WikiLeaks emails. John Podesta was involved in arranging a fundraiser to be held there for Hillary Clinton. It runs art shows featuring artists that depict child abuse and occult symbolism in their work. Now here's the map to show you. Comet Ping Pong is in red. You've got the place next door is owned by Big Cheese LLC as well, James Alefantis. Then next door to that you've got Besta Pizza, which also had the pedophile symbolism in the logo. Down the street from that you've got Prose, which is owned by Hillary Clinton's speechwriter. Across the street from that you've got Beyond Borders. It's a charity focused on Haiti, funded by the Clinton Foundation. And just next to that you've got Terrasol, which is where we saw the heart pedophile symbolism. Oh, and they're all about 4 minutes drive from John Podesta's house. Kinda coincidental, huh?
I don't know if you've realized this or not, but the most profitable thing to these bankers is war, because it forces a country to have to take a loan from them. You want to know where the next war is going to be? Look at what countries do not have a central bank. You don't think that they intentionally start wars? You think they would plot 9/11? How many wars did we get into because of 9/11? Think it could have been an inside job? Do you trust the government?
On the morning of September 11, 2001, 19 men armed with box cutters, directed by a man on dialysis in a cave fortress halfway around the world, using a satellite phone and a laptop, directed the most sophisticated penetration of the most heavily defended airspace in the world, overpowering the passengers and the military combat-trained pilots on 4 commercial aircraft before flying those planes wildly off course for over an hour without being molested by a single fighter interceptor. These 19 hijackers, devout religious fundamentalists who like to drink alcohol, snort cocaine, and live with pink-haired strippers, managed to knock down 3 buildings with 2 planes in New York, while in Washington a pilot who couldn't handle a single-engine Cessna was able to fly a 757 in an 8,000-foot descending 270-degree corkscrew turn to come exactly level with the ground, hitting the Pentagon in the budget analyst office where DoD staffers were working on the mystery of the $2.3 trillion that Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld had announced missing from the Pentagon's coffers in a press conference the day before, on September 10th, 2001. Luckily, the news anchors knew who did it within minutes.
Osama bin Laden.
The pundits knew within hours.
Osama bin Laden.
The administration knew within the day.
Terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbored them.
And the evidence literally fell into the FBI's lap.
That a hijacker's passport was found blocks from the World Trade Center crash site, if you can believe that.
But for some reason, a bunch of crazy conspiracy theorists demanded an investigation into the greatest attack on American soil in history. That investigation was delayed, underfunded, set up to fail, a conflict of interest, and a cover-up from start to finish. It was based on testimony extracted through torture, the records of which were destroyed. It failed to mention the existence of WTC-7, Able Danger, P-TECH, Sibel Edmonds, OBL and the CIA, and the drills of hijacked aircraft being flown into buildings that were being simulated at the precise same time that those events were actually happening. It was lied to by the Pentagon, the CIA, the Bush administration, and as for Bush and Cheney, well, no one knows what they told it because they testified in secret, off the record, not under oath, and behind closed doors. It didn't bother to look at who funded the attacks because that question is ultimately of little practical significance. Still, the 9/11 Commission did brilliantly, answering all of the questions the public had, except most of the victims' family members' questions, and pinned blame on all the people responsible, although no one so much as lost their job, determining the attacks were
failure of imagination.
Because
nobody in our government, at least, and I don't think the prior government that could envision flying airplanes into buildings.
Except the Pentagon, FEMA, NORAD, and the NRO. The DIA destroyed 2.5 terabytes of data on Able Danger, but that's okay because it probably wasn't important. The SEC destroyed their records on the investigation into the insider trading before the attacks, but that's okay because destroying the records of the largest investigation in SEC history is just part of routine record keeping. NIST has classified the data that they used for their model of WTC7's collapse, but that's okay because knowing how they made their model of the collapse would jeopardize public safety. The FBI has argued that all material related to their investigation of 9/11 should be kept secret from the public, but that's okay because the FBI probably has nothing to hide. This man never existed, nor is anything he had to say worthy of your attention, and if you say otherwise, you are a paranoid conspiracy theorist and deserve to be shunned by all of humanity. Likewise him, and her. And her, and her, and him. Osama bin Laden lived in a cave fortress in the hills of Afghanistan, but somehow got away. Then he was hiding out in Tora Bora, but somehow got away. Then he lived in Abbottabad for years, taunting the most comprehensive intelligence dragnet employing the most sophisticated technology in the history of the world for a decade, releasing video after video with complete impunity and getting younger and younger as he did so, before finally being found in a daring SEAL team raid which wasn't recorded on video, in which he didn't resist or use his wife as a human shield, and in which these crack special forces operatives panicked and killed this unarmed man, supposedly the best source of intelligence about those dastardly terrorists on the entire planet. Then they dumped his body in the ocean before telling anyone about it. Then a couple dozen of that team's members died in a helicopter crash in Afghanistan. This is the story of 9/11, brought to you by the media which told you the hard truths about
his head could be seen to move violently forward.
And
they took the babies out of incubators.
And
mobile production facilities.
And
the rescue of Jessica Lynch.
If you love your country and or freedom, happiness, rainbows, rock and roll, puppy dogs, apple pie, and your grandma, you will never ever express doubts about any part of this story to anyone. Ever. This has been a public service announcement by the Friends of the FBI, CIA, NSA, DIA, SEC, MSM, White House, NIST, and the 9/11 Commission. Because ignorance is strength.
Let's look carefully at the collapse itself. Notice the puffs of concrete issuing from the sides of the building well ahead of the collapse wave. Called squibs in demolition language, these are actual explosives, charges firing visibly through the exterior as gravity pulls the building down. Here are more. Shattering from the top, engulfed by banana peel plumes, these were no ordinary implosions. The Twin Towers each consisted of 3 multi-story buildings set on top of one another. To sustain the weight of so many floors, the sky lobbies had to be extra heavily reinforced. Watch a big squib coming from the sky lobby band. These core columns were discovered after the collapse. The angled cut occurs in exactly the manner that shaped charges slice through steel beams to control the way they fall. Notice the hardened, once liquid metal. Was thermite used with the shaped charge?
The job of the shaped charge is to cut steel H-beams.
The way we do this is by cutting the beam at an angle, which, through a series of beams cut at the same angle, will tend to make the building shift over and walk.
One of the things that I learned from whistleblowers from the cabal itself is that they have to work within something they call the rules. And this is very, very important. So I really want to make sure that this gets into the film. The rules are a body of spiritual principles that they must follow in order to be allowed to exist. Now, what do I mean by allowed to exist? I mean that they are aware that there are benevolent forces that will prevent them from achieving their goals unless we give them permission to enslave us. Now think about that. Well, I didn't give them permission. So why did they put this plan for 3 world wars on display in a book that's hanging there open behind glass in the British Museum Library of London? And those 3 world wars that they're outlining are exactly World War I, World War II, and the war on terrorism. Because the rules state that they have to tell us what they're doing. Therefore, if we allow it to happen, we have consented to tyranny, we have consented to enslavement. Now, if you get into the secret history of the Cabal, this was rediscovered by Queen Elizabeth, the original Elizabeth that we've heard about from the 1500s. Queen Elizabeth's royal astrologer, a man named John Dee, who is the prototype of the wizard with the long beard, the hat, and what he did was to rediscover, through these ancient documents that were in the Vatican, the technology of how to access what they considered to be spiritual beings that were useful to them, but what we would consider to be demonic or evil beings. These beings need to be accessed through a very complex set of rituals and ceremonies. You cannot just ask for them to show up. You have to follow very elaborate and specific protocols. If you follow those protocols, it's like having an IP address, which is what we use to go online in order to notate a website. Every website has its own IP address. These spiritual beings, such as Baal and Moloch, which they still do ceremonies for today, such as in Bohemian Grove, there is a giant effigy, stone effigy of an owl. That's the god Moloch. The god Moloch goes all the way back to Rome and Carthage, in which they were offering child sacrifices to this god in exchange for power. So John Dee rediscovered the technology of how to draw the magic circles, how to say the right incantations, how to actually do black magic on a governmental level. This is what people are going to have so much trouble with once disclosure happens, is that these people actually practice black magic, and they are very, very good at it.
Let's be real for a second. It doesn't matter if we agree or not. I do personally believe in God. You may not, but what we can both agree on is that the people running this show, the people running this country, the people running the world, the people trying to create a one-world government, the UN, they do believe in a higher power. They do worship Satan, Lucifer, Moloch. They do mock and real human sacrifices to these entities. The Bible says that Satan is the father of all lies. If he's the father, then they are the children. They learned that if they can lie to you about who you are, where we are, what our role is with creation, then you are easily controlled. They have lied and have created false science just to brainwash us. Example, they tell us that nothing exploded and made everything. Think about that for a moment. Nothing created everything. The theory, not fact. The theory of the Big Bang, which defies the law of conservation of mass energy. They give us the theory of evolution that our great-great-great-great-grandparents were monkeys, that we are accidents. They have learned that by making you small and meaningless, then it is a whole lot easier for you to be controlled. So they start brainwashing you your whole entire life throughout the public education system, giving you these false sciences. And then to top it off, they tell us that Earth is just a small, meaningless planet in an ever-expanding universe where there are hundreds upon millions upon billions of other planets bigger than us with more intelligent life out there. And they back it up with a government agency designed for indoctrination and brainwashing, known as NASA. Watch, I'll show you.
The Vector, NASA's official logo. If you've ever looked at NASA's official logo, both their official insignia and their official seal, you'll see that the most prominent object in the seal is a red swooshing object. They call that the chevron or the vector. If you ask NASA's Public Affairs Office, this symbology is featured so heavily in their insignia and seal, they'll give you what really amounts to the standard facile cover story for the unilluminated. They'll tell you that that is a representation of a hypersonic wing design from the 1950s, which was the time the logo was created. Not exactly the case. Someone might want to ask the Russian Federal Space Agency, Roscosmos, that was formed in 1992, why they chose that same logo. And while you're at it, you can go ask the Chinese, who formed their space agency in 1996, why in the world they're using a hypersonic wing design from the 1950s as their official logo. Then you can ask the Japanese, the South Koreans, Taiwanese, Malaysia, Mexico, Iran, all of these countries, even Bulgaria. They all utilize the vector symbology in their space agency logos for their national space agencies. It gets even deeper. You can go look at the individual manned program patches for NASA. The Mercury program, for example, a blatant use of covert symbology. In every logo dealing with the Mercury program, you'll see what looks like a number 7 in their logo. And again, NASA's official story is that they put this number 7 there so that they could pay homage to the original 7 Mercury astronauts. Kind of forgetting the fact that only 6 Mercury astronauts actually flew into space, because number 7 never did. Deke Slayton had a heart problem, so he didn't get to go up. So there were only 6 Mercury astronauts. Yet there's a 7 in every single logo. That's in the official mission or official program insignia for Mercury, as well as the 6 individual mission patches carry this logo. And it carries on to the Space Shuttle program. If you look at the Apollo logo has a big letter A in it. At least that's what they want you to believe, but it's not. Again, that's just a simple way of explaining away the inclusion of this vector symbology in the logo. If you go to the Space Shuttle program, the original Space Shuttle STS program patch is a triangular patch that, again, hides the use of the chevronic vector symbology. And that also goes for many of the STS-specific mission patches. Every single one of the International Space Station expedition patches carry the vector symbology. The Russian Mir space station used the vector symbology. That was their official logo. You can even go deeper and look at military-industrial complex companies. Look at the logo on a company like Lockheed Martin, 2 vectors. The X-Prize logo, Ames Research Labs, U.S. Space Command. When you get into the military realm, the United States Space Command, their official logo is the vector symbol. And when you look at the military's individual space-specific programs, all of them deal with vector symbology in their official insignias. And the question really becomes, who or what are these people paying homage to? And the truth, quite frankly, is out of this world.
Look, everything from NASA is fake. This dude on the harness. You see that? It's just a harness. Hollywood effects. Nothing more, nothing less. You think you can trust the government? Doesn't matter which government it is. You think you can trust the government? All space exploration is by the government. think they would tell you the truth about what's out there, about what's not out there? Or are they built upon secrecy? Don't they swear oaths of secrecy? Why is it that everything they put out is fake? See this dude? Look, he fades out. It's a fade. He's faded out as he goes around this corner. It's Hollywood. It's green screen technology, blue screen technology, CGI. Hollywood effects. See, the thing is, they do live streams. So things glitch. Because of the glitches, we catch it. They can't edit the live stream. So we are lucky. But soon, what they put out is going to be flawless, and you won't be able to catch this stuff no more. You need to wake up right now while you can. Look at this dude. Harness. He bends over. Look at that shirt. Right here. Boom. It's all fake. Can you trust a single word NASA says? They are liars.
In Maryland, home to the National Space Science Data Archives.
This film you're making now, what is it? Does it have a name? I mean, do you have a name for it yet, or are you
calling it Did We Go?
Did We Go? Okay, okay.
Doesn't have it either. The Smithsonian doesn't have it. Johnson doesn't have it.
Right. We've been unable to track it down. I mean, we don't know where this telemetry data ended up, and we don't know what path it may have taken. So, unfortunately, I'm afraid I can't really give you much of a clue as to where this data ended up and whether it still exists or not.
NASA admitted that it had lost the original footage of man's first steps on the moon. My next guest, Aaron Rainin, started out believing the official version of history. Tell us why you have changed your mind and now become a skeptic.
I was the first to report, and you played the clip earlier tonight, that all the science data, the telemetry data, was missing. Now, Geraldo, for NASA to come out and say that all the tapes were erased, I mean, it's incredible. Geraldo, this isn't just one tape. This is rooms of tape labeled Apollo 11 moon landing. Someone had to physically go and erase it. And it just, you know, I really, in my heart, Geraldo, I want us to go. And I know all your viewers want us to go.
We're also joined in L.A. by Bill Nye, the science guy. Bill, Aaron's right about erasing these tapes. I mean...
No, okay, it's my turn, kids. Okay? So, what happened, these were NASA tapes, and I got lost. Stuff happened.
Yeah, stuff happens. Hey, if Armstrong was the first person on the moon, who filmed it? Everything that they tell you is fake. It's all a lie. They need you to believe in NASA. They need you to believe in space. Look, their spacewalks, their live spacewalks, is filmed in the swimming pools that they tell you they practice in. Scuba diver, right there. This is why there's bubbles in their live spacewalks. Why are there bubbles in space? Maybe because they are not in space. Scuba tanks in their spacewalks. It's all fake. Everything they give you is fake. It's CGI. It's high altitude planes. It's every trick in the book. Blue screen, green screen, zero-G fake makeup, wire harness, it doesn't matter. You can't trust a single thing NASA tells you. They've never been on the moon. They're not in space. There is no ISS. Every picture they give you of any planet, even Earth, is just a picture,
a painting, a composite, an artist rendition. Can't trust a single thing they say. Harnesses, CGI. It's all fake. Wake up. Zero G at this dude falls. Here, I'll tell you what, let's watch this dude do a somersault for the kids.
Low Earth orbit is between 99 miles and 1,200 miles away. The moon is claimed to be 238,000 miles away. That's a big difference.
This is the spacecraft that's going to take humans to explore the solar system. It's the next big step for NASA in exploration.
Called the Orion Multipurpose Crew Vehicle, or MPCV, this next-generation spacecraft will enable America to explore beyond low Earth orbit.
The plan that NASA has is to build a rocket called SLS, which is a heavy lift rocket. It's something that is much bigger than what we have today, and it will be able to launch the Orion capsule with humans on board, as well as landers or other components to destinations beyond Earth orbit. Right now, we only can fly in Earth orbit. That's the farthest that we can go. Right now, we only can fly in Earth orbit. That's the farthest that we can go. And this new system that we're building is going to allow us to go beyond and hopefully take humans into the solar system to explore. So the moon, Mars, asteroids, there's a lot of destinations that we could go to, and we're building these building block components in order to allow us to do that eventually. The moon, Mars, the moon.
Kinds of technologies that we're testing out on Space Station are definitely helping us with our goals of going beyond low Earth orbit.
A set of crewed flights will test and prove the systems required for exploration beyond low Earth orbit.
Don, you're getting ready to launch to the International Space Station to be part of Expeditions 30 and 31. Give me a summary of what the mission goals are for your time on orbit and what responsibilities and jobs are going to be yours when you're up there.
Well, I'm one of the science guys and I'm one of the repair guys. And fortunately, there's lots of science and lots of repair to do on station, so that will certainly keep us all busy. You have a whole series of O-rings in here, and a shaft that you rotate.
So, I mean, like on the space station, how many of these would you have?
7, because we have 7 windows.
What happens if you get a leak on that?
Then you have a leak.
You just have a leak.
And what you would do is...
You lose air.
Got him! Yeah, you would probably seal the whole cupola off, and then there's probably a plan. I don't know off the top of my head, but there's probably a plan.
So with the special shape of this cup, and you can see I'm continuing to suck the coffee out, or actually sip the coffee, because we're no longer sucking out of a bag now. We're drinking from a cup, and the coffee continues to climb up that acute angle, and until the whole bag is drained.
I'd go to the moon in a nanosecond. The problem is we don't have the technology to do that anymore. We used to, but we destroyed that technology, and it's a painful process to build it back again.
Is that what always happens? Does it always go like that?
Yep.
It looks fun to me. It's in space. Or is it? Is that it?
Yep, I think that's it.
Right in the middle. Oh no, it's going down.
Well, Mark.
Those rockets are not going into space launching satellites. This is a real satellite launch right here. It's an 8,000-pound piece of metal that gets lifted up into the air by a big balloon in Antarctica. When it's about to come down, the Air Force sends C-130s in, and they pick them up. That ball, that round ball you see at the top of that satellite, that triangulates its location. If you get up on Google, you can do a quick search, and you can tell me how hot the thermosphere gets. That's where the satellites are, supposedly, quote unquote. 3,632 degrees. What are satellites made out of? What type of metal? And their melting points. You believe in satellites? Yeah, that's what I thought.
Transatlantic cable began ushering in global communications. And now tech giants are taking that undersea revolution a big step further. Here's Mark Albert.
When you pick up the phone to reach out and touch someone across the oceans, it's only possible because of ships like the Global Sentinel.
This is cable tank number 1.
And what am I standing on right now?
You're standing on fiber optic cable that's going to be laid from here towards Brazil.
eConnectivity Subcom, which calls itself the world's largest provider of under-ocean fiber optic cable.
They're calling it the
in New Hampshire.
So the cable we're walking on right now will be under the ocean carrying my phone calls?
Yes, it will. It's a good chance any call you make to South America.
The machines use water jets to create a trench, allowing the cable to sink into the seabed and become buried.
95% of all telephone and data is transferred over submarine cables.
Not satellite?
Not satellite.
Why has nobody been to the moon in such a long time?
That's not an 8-year-old's question. That's my question. I want to know, but I think I know. Because we didn't go there, and that's the way it happened. And if it didn't happen, it's nice to know why it didn't happen, so in the future, if we want to keep doing something, we need to know why something stopped in the past that we wanted to keep it going.
No way. That's great.
Dawn, greetings, young one.
What would you like for consumables? Pop-Tarts, chicken embryos, seasoned patties of ground animal flesh?
I'm not really hungry. Just some Tang.
Ah, Tang, the drink the astronauts took to the moon.
Astronauts to the moon.
The mainstream media is owned by only a handful of megacorporations with vested interests. But on the other hand, the internet is an interconnected network of billions of sources. So you can research information for yourself. All right, do you see Photoshop?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And if those of you who think this technical difficulty was planned and think I'm scamming you, go do it for yourself. Because you're going to find the exact same thing. I got nothing to hide here. This is live on the air, okay? I'm going to zoom in on the Earth in Photoshop. You see the Earth?
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to go to Image, Adjust, Levels, and I'm going to bring the levels over here. And I'm going to bring the levels up. Uh-oh. What is that?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, wow. Why is there a square box around the Earth allegedly taken from the scientists on the moon in Apollo 17? And people wonder why I don't trust NASA. That's why I don't trust NASA.
I mean, they're always out there saying, you know, Rob, everybody's trying to show you stuff from space, and you keep rejecting it. This is why I reject it. These guys are liars. I mean, anybody who has Photoshop can just go to the NASA website, download the photo, do exactly what I did, see for yourself. Then you got other pictures like this, the blue marble, right, that come out. Okay, well, there's a big problem with the blue marble, and I'm going to zoom in here and show you what the problem is. These are all composite images where they are really not very good at Photoshop because they're using the Photoshop clone tool to replicate clouds. This cloud is a copy of this cloud. See the formations? They're identical formations, side by side.
Wow.
Right? These right here, side by side, side by side. See this kind of W-looking shape right here, replicated right here. This cloud is exactly the same as that cloud. You know, same clouds right there, and same thing on the other side of the world. They got the same thing going on. They got careless. Here, look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the same formations replicated right there. These two replicated, same exact formations right here. This right here is clone of that right there. I mean, really? So you're telling me that we could take pictures of Jupiter and Saturn, huge, massive planets, and now we're out going to Pluto, but we don't have one legitimate picture of the Earth from space that's not a composite? Really?
They can't prove the globe because it doesn't exist.
In 2002, Blue Marble 2.0, NASA's Rob Simon made this. And it had wide appeal too. For example, it ended up as the default background on the iPhone.
I didn't even know until I bought an iPhone and turned it on and kind of did a little happy dance.
Simon's job is...
It's primarily taking data and making pictures out of it.
That's what this is, a composite of data sets from several different instruments translated into a picture.
To us, the really cool thing was the data set. Up until that point, there was no realistic color map of the globe anywhere.
So the land layer here comes from
the Moderate Resolution Imaging Spectroradiometer aboard Terra.
And the tricky part here was the weather.
So we actually had to take clouds out.
They stashed the clouds for later, went onto the ocean. That came from an instrument that measures phytoplankton in the sea.
Where it was low, I colored it dark blue because they're low mostly in mid-oceans. And then where it was a little bit higher, it was like a little bit brighter green.
Then add the clouds back in.
There's a small problem with it because there's a very slight gap in between each orbit.
So some of those are painted on.
It is photoshopped, but it's has to be.
Then
there was another layer to sort of simulate the atmosphere.
And then there's this little bright spot.
It's called the specular highlight. So it's the reflection of sunlight off of water.
Those are the pieces, but you can't just slap them all together.
It just didn't look realistic. It looks kind of flat, or the clouds are sort of too see-through. So I just hit Command Z a lot.
There's artistry to creating the world.
What I imagine it to be. Unfortunately, I'm not an astronaut. I've never been to space. But I've looked at these images over and over again, trying to sort of get the essence of it. It is photoshopped, but it's has to be. It is photoshopped, but it's has to be.
You know, if God was real, we wouldn't need to rely on the powers of the government, upon the doctrines and traditions of man to be taken care of, to solve our problems. If God was real, then the government would be rendered useless. Would they lie to us about God? Would they try to hide God from us? This is a deep question. To maintain their own personal power, to push their agendas, would they hide God from you? You know, the Bible tells us that Earth is flat, enclosed within a glass dome. In that glass dome is the sun, the moon, the stars. Would they hide that from you? Would they perpetuate a hoax vast enough to lull people asleep? Would they tell you the truth?
Jeff was saying earlier that the president is isolated in his beliefs here because he's got virtually no support on Capitol Hill on this statement, Jake.
It's amazing to watch the White House continue to argue that the Earth is flat. Jeff Zeleny, Manu Raju, thank you so much.
But I don't have much patience for anyone who denies that this challenge is real. We don't have time for a meeting of the Flat Earth Society.
If I say that the world is round and someone else says it's flat, that's worth reporting. But you might also want to report on a bunch of scientific evidence that seems to support the notion that the world is round.
We're trying to move towards the future. They want to be stuck in the past. And we've heard this kind of thinking before. Let me tell you something. If some of these folks were around when Columbus set sail, they must have been founding members of the Flat Earth Society. They would not have believed that the world was round.
Although we weren't able to shatter that highest, hardest glass ceiling this time, thanks to you, it's got about 18 million cracks in it. And it may be hard to see tonight, but we are all standing under a glass ceiling right now.
And today we still have to combat the flat earth mentality.
We have people who still deny this. Members of the Flat Earth Society who seem to believe that who seem to believe that ocean rise won't be a problem because the water will just spill over the edge. This is, it's insane. It's insulting.
I know we have still not shattered that highest and hardest glass ceiling, but someday someone will, and hopefully sooner than we might think right now.
A new breed of isolationists seem to think domestic policy ends at the water's edge. Well, thank God they weren't around back in 1492. Imagine the hard time they've given Christopher Columbus. Voices on the right and left are working right now to breathe life into those old flat earth theories of protectionism, of isolationism, that there is no going back. 5 centuries ago, men of courage and vision set sail from Europe, searching for new trade routes and opportunities. And he defied the timid counsel of those who said the earth was flat.
Yes, the earth is flat. See, they make a joke out of it. They turn it into a mockery. And they mention Flat Earth Society, and no flat earther actually believes a single word Flat Earth Society puts out. That's just controlled opposition, used to steer you away from the truth and make a mockery of the truth. For a more detailed approach at Flat Earth, I would consider checking out my other video, Biblical Cosmology Flat Earth 101, that indulges into the scriptures, the science, the history, everything. But until then, let's just address the elephant in the room.
Flat Earth has long been touted as the mother of all conspiracy theories, suppressed and ridiculed for centuries as being an ignorant, unscientific worldview. But the facts of the matter are far from what you've been told. It is a fact, not a theory, that bodies of water always seek and find their own level. From a pond, lake, or an ocean, the natural physics of water is to find and remain level. It is a fact that the majority of Earth is covered in such level water, thus making it an unscientific theory to postulate that Earth is actually a gigantic sphere with bendy oceans curving all the way around it. It is an unproven, unscientific theory with no observable, measurable, or repeatable evidence to claim that bodies of water can somehow bend, cling to the exterior of shapes, and show convexity upon their surface. It is a fact, not a theory, that we are able to observe objects at incredibly long distances, far beyond what would be possible if Earth were a globe 25,000 miles in circumference, as we're told. For example, it is a fact that in Genoa, Italy, from just above sea level, it is possible to see the distant islands of Elba, Caprea, and Corsica 80 to 125 miles away. It is a necessary theory that the globe Earth must curve 8 inches per mile squared if it really be a ball 25,000 miles in circumference, as we're told. But based on such a theory, these islands would all be completely hidden behind thousands of feet of curved Earth. It is a fact, not a theory, that the horizon always appears perfectly flat, 360 degrees around the observer, regardless of altitude. All amateur balloon, rocket, plane, and drone footage show a completely flat horizon as high as we can reach, over 20 miles or 120,000 feet up. It is an observable, testable, repeatable, scientific fact of reality that Polaris, the North Pole star, situated perfectly over the North Pole center of Earth, never moves a single inch. Night after night, year after year, century after century, with all the other fixed stars remaining fixed in their relative constellations, revolving perfect circles around Polaris. It is also an unobservable, unscientific theory to claim that the Earth is spinning 1,000 miles per hour, and the Milky Way shoots millions of miles per hour more off through infinite space, when we cannot see, hear, feel, or otherwise observe or prove any such motion. And we can see clearly for ourselves Polaris never moving, and all the other stars revolving around it. This is just a brief introduction to the many observable, testable, repeatable scientific facts of our level, motionless plain Earth that have been suppressed and ridiculed for centuries in favor of various unobservable, untestable, unscientific theories purporting we live on a tilting, wobbling, spinning, ball-shaped Earth. When you look up at the sun and moon, you see two equally sized, equidistant circles tracing similar paths at similar speeds around a flat, stationary Earth.
Rise up, look at that great cosmic light and think about it. That gets up in the eastern horizon every morning and moves across the sky with a kind of symphony of motion and paints its technicolor across the blue, a light that man could never make. They become so involved in thinking about man's progress, they forget to think about the need for God's power.
The experts at NASA, however, claim your common sense, everyday experience is false on all counts. To begin with, they say the Earth is not flat, but a big ball, not stationary, but spinning around 19 miles per second. They say the sun does not revolve around the Earth as it appears, but Earth revolves around the sun. And the sun is actually 400 times larger than the moon and 400 times farther away. That's right. You can clearly see they're the same size and distance. You can see the Earth is flat. You can feel the Earth is stationary. But according to the gospel of modern astronomy, the Earth spins 1,038 miles per hour under your feet and revolves 67,108 miles per hour around the sun. Copernicus calculated the sun's distance from Earth to be 3,391,200 miles. The next century, Johannes Kepler decided it was actually 12,376,800 miles away. Isaac Newton once said, "It matters not whether we reckon it 28 or 54 million miles distant, for either would do just as well." How scientific.
Science!
Benjamin Martin calculated between 81 and 82 million miles. The moon is actually a semi-transparent luminary and not the solid spherical desert planet that NASA would have us believe. In fact, it is likely that both the sun and moon are not densely physical at all, and are simply luminous flat disks able to pass by or through one another during eclipses. The sun and moon luminaries revolve around the Earth once every 24 hours for the sun and approximately 25 hours for the moon, illuminating like spotlights the areas over which they pass. The sun's annual journey from tropic to tropic, solstice to solstice, is what determines the length and character of days, nights, and seasons. What can be more common than the observation that, standing at one end of a long row of lampposts, those nearest to us seem to be the highest, and those farthest away the lowest. As we move along towards the opposite end of the series, those which we approach seem to get higher, and those we are leaving behind appear to gradually become lower. It is an ordinary effect of perspective for an object to appear lower and lower as the observer goes farther and farther away from it. Let anyone try the experiment. The apparently uprising surface of the Earth upon or over which it stands will converge to the angle which constitutes the vanishing point or the horizon, beyond which it will be invisible. Heliocentrists would have you believe the very opposite of what every human who has ever walked the Earth has seen with their own eyes. It is obvious to any child and sovereign-minded adult that the sun, moon, stars, and planets, every light in the sky above, revolves around the motionless Earth beneath our feet. It is also plain to see that the sun and moon are both approximately the same size and situated relatively close to Earth, not 400 times divergent and millions upon millions of miles away. To abandon your senses and everyday experience in favor of such unfounded science fiction fantasies is a fallacy of appeal to authority so extreme that it leaves the brainwashed believer impotent to trust his own natural instincts and forever thereafter chained to the fantastical explanations of astronomical charlatans.
Timon!
Yeah?
Ever wonder what those sparkly dots are up there?
Pumbaa. I don't wonder. I know.
Oh, what are they?
They're fireflies. Fireflies that got stuck up in that big bluish black thing.
Oh, gee. I always thought they were balls of gas burning billions of miles away.
Who told you something like that? What mook made that up?
Yeah, pretty dumb, huh?
Oh, you're killing me.
Stay fixed in their constellation patterns night after night, year after year, century after century, never changing their relative positions. If Earth was truly a tilting, wobbling, spinning space ball, as NASA and modern astronomy proclaim, the star patterns would never look the same 2 nights in a row, let alone be fixed in exactly the same constellations for thousands upon thousands of years.
I want to talk about flat Earth. And I notice things like when you search it in a search engine, all you get is misinformation. You don't even get real critical thought on it. I saw the blanket censorship, which tells me there's truth to it. Tells me that they're panicking. They're in panic mode, and they don't want us to have real, tangible information. More importantly, they don't want you to think critically about it. See, we're in the information age, and this is what the tactic is. This is why Logan Paul just did a video on Flat Earth. It's why Shane Dawson just did a series of videos. It's to discredit the real truth. Truth. It tells me that there's something here that they don't want you to know. It tells me that mainstream science, NASA, more importantly, our government powers, are panicking. So they're hiring through the same companies that they own, because there's only 6 companies, by the way. If it's a wild conspiracy theory, why do they need to discredit it? If it's a wild conspiracy theory and it isn't the truth, and no one's going to believe it because they're smart enough to think on their own, why do they need to discredit it? Why do they need, and these same people, keep in mind, Logan Paul, Disney is the parent company. I'm pretty sure he gets a check from Walt Disney. Why would they then put out these misinformation campaigns? I mean, ask yourself these logical questions. I think we know the answer, and I think we know the reason. Is it possible that we're living in that Truman Show today? We're living on the flat earth with the dome, the firmament. Maybe instead of being a worthless blob of goo that came from nothing and then developing into apes that were oohing and aahing and then eating bananas like a bunch of idiots, maybe instead of that, we actually are the center of the universe. Maybe we are special. In fact, maybe there is unbelievable evidence of creation. But the government has decided to hide that from you. Why? Why is there so much misinformation? Why is there a giant disinformation campaign going on right now when it comes to things like flat Earth? Are my eyes lying to me? Or can I trust what I'm actually seeing? But Christopher, the Earth is a globe. I was told that when I was 1 year old. They said, look, this is a globe. Isn't it interesting? It's one of the first things that you're actually taught. The Earth isn't flat, it's a globe. Even though for hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of years, they thought that the Earth was flat. Oh, but Christopher, we have all these images of outer space that show that the Earth is a sphere. Really? Where do the images come from? NASA. Oh, you mean the same NASA that is our government, our secretive breakaway government that hasn't been back to the moon since the 1960s. That NASA? Have you ever seen it with your own eyes? How come none of the electronics account for curvature of the Earth when you're flying a plane? None of the engineering of bridges and train tracks, buildings, all kinds of infrastructure that goes for miles and hundreds and maybe thousands of miles, none of it accounts for, in its actual engineering blueprints, for the curvature of the Earth. I mean, if I was building a giant bridge of hundreds of miles, wouldn't I have to account for the curve? Or is it possible there's not a curve and that we've been lied to for a reason?
Just our common sense everyday perception of the Earth, it is flat as far as we can tell. It is motionless as far as we can tell. And everything in the sky is revolving around us as far as we can tell. If nobody told us otherwise, we'd logically assume that the Earth was flat, motionless, with everything in the sky revolving around us. Now you can prove that this is the case as well, for instance, with the horizon. As you rise up, no matter how high you go on the top of Mount Everest, or if you go in a balloon higher and higher, we've gotten independent balloons have gone up with cameras. The horizon remains flat all the way around and rises to the eye of the camera all the way up. Totally flat and rises to the eye of the observer. So that's one proof. Now, if the Earth were a ball, no matter how big, the horizon is said to be the curvature of the ball.
If you were to go to NASA, it's all fraud, it's all fake. Pretty much everything NASA puts out is fraudulent. There are no images of Earth from space. Put an end to this topic once and for all, turn the Hubble round and show us Earth in real time, but they will not do it. They can't do it. It doesn't exist. It literally doesn't exist. Looking at these images of Earth, including the one they called the Big Blue Marble, which was released in 2002, I think. Zoom into it with Photoshop, you'll see where they've used the clone tool in Photoshop to take a picture of one of the clouds and stamp it in various places around the picture. They got lazy.
If the Earth is 25,000 miles in circumference, there must exist a curvature drop of 8 inches times the mile when you square the mile. 1 mile means there should be an 8-inch curvature drop. 2 miles, 2 times 2 times 8 is 32. That's 32-inch drop. 3 miles would be a 72-inch drop. And this would exponentially continue. Here's the longest bridge in the world. The Danyang Kongchon Grand Bridge in China. 102.4 miles long. There should exist nearly 7,000 feet of curvature drop in that bridge. 7,000 foot curvature drop. Do you see it? It ain't there. Look at the horizon. It's flat.
You can see in that dive shot that the inside camera, the horizon is completely flat. Then it goes to the outside, and you got a huge curve. But when you're looking at some of the amateur balloon footage, some of it's lens corrected and it's completely flat. And others, like the GoPro stuff, the horizon will fluctuate as the camera spins and tilts. The horizon will go convex and concave. A lens effect. It's obviously not the horizon shifting every 2 seconds as the camera jumps. And when it's still, you can see all the way up, totally flat. NASA is essentially Hollywood, and all the images that you think you've seen of a spinning ball Earth are faked. And all the amateur balloon and rocket footage that we've sent up there shows a flat horizon that rises all the way up. And that's impossible on a ball.
Humans, for the most part, don't have a clue. They don't want one or need one either. They're happy. They think they have a good beat on things.
Well, why the big secret? People are smart. They can handle it.
The person is smart. People are dumb, panicky, dangerous animals, and you know it. 1,500 years ago, everybody knew the Earth was the center of the universe. 500 years ago, everybody knew the Earth was flat. Imagine what you know.
I know we have still not shattered that highest and hardest glass ceiling, but someday someone will, and hopefully sooner than we might think.
As the galaxies go whizzing by over the glass dome ceiling. Now tell me that doesn't work for you.
If it's true, does it change how I live my life? This is something that is not an easy answer because of the magnitude of what we're talking about here. How it will change your life, first of all, when you understand it, is dramatic, to say the least. Will it change you from having to go to your job every day and the things that you typically do every day? No. But when this knowledge becomes more mainstream and these agencies are starting to be held accountable, and you understand that they're all participating in this, not just the United States government, not just NASA, but China, Russia, India, all of them have space programs. They all have the same symbolism. They're all doing the exact same thing to their citizenry. And the first thing you have to understand about this is that the deception goes all the way to the top. And when I say all the way to the top, you have to kind of get rid of the notion that the people at the very highest levels are working together. Why would they do this? Why are they trying to hide the fact that we are on an infinite plane or on a flat earth rather than a ball? Well, if you isolate people into the idea that they're on a blue marble that's in the middle of a universe that is really insignificant, and there's thousands or millions and billions of other worlds and possibly other civilizations, that makes most people think that we are insignificant and that we did actually come about as some sort of an accident. Now, when people believe that, their minds are much more malleable into being given the idea that there is no God, there is no creator. And because of that, that also gives the controllers this fertile soil to build other deceptions on.
Why do you think that Truman has never come close to discovering the true nature of his world until now?
We accept the reality of the world with which we're presented. It's as simple as that.
It's about total control, mental, physical, spiritual, every way, shape, form possible.
You have to remember how big of a conspiracy this is. This isn't talking about just the JFK thing or isn't talking about just 9/11. It's on an umbrella kind of system to where it is the biggest deception that there is. It actually exposes every other deception, and nothing else brings down the power of the elite because it really exposes education, science, the economy, television, museums, universities. Think of all the things that have been fooled. I feel worse for the people that are out there building satellites, the people that are out there actually working for these space agencies, the people out there teaching in schools as professors, because they would all come to the conclusion eventually, once this gets out, that they've all been contributing to the lie.
Why do you believe what you believe? Prove it without using NASA or any other space agency, the government or military of any country in the world. Why would I say that? NASA has been proven to be liars time and time again. I could spend a whole weekend here showing you the lies of NASA. How many of you believe your government is 100% honest and can be trustworthy? And how many of you know the military answers to their government? Okay, so if those three sources are all proven liars, why would you trust them? Fool me once, right? Shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I say, continue to believe pathological liars and you're an idiot. But that's what we've all done. And so, I look at these stuff, we've all seen the textbooks, we've all seen the videos and movies and all these things, and there's so much of it. Do you know what the budget NASA has? You know how much they get? How much money they get? Have you seen the movie Gravity? Okay. That's made for about $100 million, give or take. And if you saw the movie Gravity, that was pretty impressive. I saw it on IMAX, big screen, like, wow. I mean, I felt like I was with Sandra Bullock flying around in space, freaking out myself. Okay, this is what they're able to do with $100 million. What are you able to do with tens of billions of dollars a year since the 60s?
Now, in my opinion, we're being lied to not only about the shape of the Earth, we're being lied to about the very nature of reality itself. In 1954, Admiral Richard Byrd, a highly decorated naval officer, conducted an interview where he alluded to the idea that there may very well be land beyond the poles.
Admiral Byrd, you've been to both the North Pole and the South Pole. Is there any unexplored land left on this Earth that might appeal to adventurous young Americans?
Yes, there is. But strangely enough, there's left in the world today an area as big as the United States that's never been seen by a human being. And that's beyond the pole, on the other side of the South Pole, from Middle America. And it's, I think it's quite astonishing that there should be an area as big as that unexplored.
That's a tremendous
So
challenge.
there's a lot of adventure left down at the bottom of the world.
Admiral, do you hope to see that?
We don't know. That's the big problem. We don't know where we are. Okay? That's what we're all trying to figure out here. But there is the Antarctic Treaty where, 53 or so nations have signed saying that no one's going to lay claim to Antarctica and that there are massive restrictions for travel there. You can't just get up and go to Antarctica on your own. You have to have a tour guide with you. There are only certain entry points and there are limits on where you can go search.
Personally, I think the unconquered South Face is the only one worth scaling. It's a 20,000-foot sheer wall of ice, but that's never stopped me before. Welcome.
No, I just want to stand on top of the wall and piss off the edge of the world.
What difference does it make? What difference does it make? Yeah, that's their favorite line. Got a lot of people, what difference does it make? You can't figure out what difference it makes? If you can't figure out what difference it makes that the people running your world have lying to you over and over your whole life, if you can't figure out that someone lying to you is trying to control you, suppressing of information, of knowledge is control. Deception of information and knowledge is a form of control. So what difference does it make? It makes a big difference, because once they start omitting information or lying about information about where you live, they're doing it to control you, period. Why am I having to explain this to critical thinkers in the truth movement? The way you control billions of people is to keep them divided and fighting each other. Flat Earth is not a psyop. Flat Earth destroys the psyop. Every psyop that's been used to control us for as long as they've known about it. So this system has been in power and control for hundreds of years, ever since they convinced the rest of the world that they didn't know where they live. It created this fantastical scenario to make people feel insignificant and to follow those that appear to know better. Why is the flat earth so important? Because it shows the deception. And if everybody would just come together and demand answers, they would be in checkmate. They would not know what to do.
Train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. I believe that's why we have so many who are indoctrinated to still believe and fight so hard for the heliocentric model. The reason being is because we've been taught the globe model since before we had the ability to think for ourselves. Think about that. Before you could think for yourself, before you could form rational thought, you've been taught that you live on a spinning ball, although your five senses tell you something totally different. Our senses tell us that the earth is flat and stationary, that the sun and moon and the stars rotate above us just as we see, that they make their annual cycles in such a way that we can calculate days, months, and years of the passage of time, just like in Scripture. The earth in itself works like a well-designed timepiece, and we all know that any timepiece that we can think of has a designer. What if the lie is to hide the existence of that designer? What if they're lying to us about this because they're hiding God?
3 million miles away? I think not. I saw the setup occurring in the cloud patterns from where I was, knowing that tonight would be very likely spectacular to illustrate the placement of the sun. in the clouds. And that's also what I'm highlighting here. The position of the sun vanishing from this perspective or setting is considerably more west. It was way over there just even a month ago. Now it's right over here. Take a close look at that cloud that the sun is nestled in the midst of. What do you make of that? The reason why I do this and the reason this is important is simply because of the mass satanic mind control programming that's inundating the population of the world. And I'm one of the individuals that will help you to see this world in a different perspective.
And God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons, and for days and years, and let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and it was so. And God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night, and he made the stars also.
Now let's have a look at the stars and the planets through a real telescope in comparison to the demonstration I just performed.
And God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons, and for days and years, and let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and it was so. And God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night, and he made the stars also. We live in a giant timepiece. There is no way an accidental Big Bang created a clock. Order out of chaos. God made a timepiece.
And God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons, and for days and years, and let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and it was so. And God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. And he made the stars also. We live in a giant timepiece. There is no way an accidental Big Bang created a clock. Order out of chaos. God made a timepiece.
The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. Day unto day uttereth speech, and night unto night showeth knowledge. There is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. Their line has gone out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In them hath he set a tabernacle for the sun, which is as a bridegroom coming out of his chamber, and rejoiceth as a strong man to run a race. His going forth is from the end of the heaven, and his circuit unto the ends of it. And there is nothing hid from the heat thereof.
But this is a NASA technical manual. MIT, the Army Research Laboratory, flying over a flat, non-rotating Earth. Flat Earth with a flat Earth assumption. Non-rotating flat Earth. A flat, non-rotating Earth may be assumed. A flat and non-rotating, assuming a flat Earth. Flat, non-rotating Earth. A non-rotating Earth. Flat, non-rotating Earth. Validity of flat Earth based on a flat Earth assumption for a flat Earth and a flat atmosphere. Flat, non-rotating Earth. The flat Earth model. Propagation of electromagnetic fields over flat Earth. Ballistic vehicle motion. A closed-form solution is developed for the motion of a ballistic vehicle entering the atmosphere over a flat, non-rotating Earth. The assumption of these equations assume a flat Earth.
Flat Earth, the truth of flat Earth won't save you. It won't wash your sins away. It won't give you eternal life. It won't open a door for you into heaven. It's a great revelation. It's a great truth. It's liberating when you get free from the lies. This was kind of, for me, this was the final lie. I knew the truth about 9/11. I knew the truth about the Illuminati, the New World Order, the world government. I know Bible prophecy really well, and I've been watching it happen in the world for the last 30 years. But this was the final lie. This was one of the big ones, and when it lifted off of me, it was wonderful. But it's not the end all, folks. It's not the end of the, it's just, for some of you, it's a beginning, but it's a good beginning. If you go the next steps you need to go. I want you to understand that when I talk about Jesus, I'm not talking about just a theological creed or something that you just choose to believe or a religion. I'm talking about someone you can know personally, intimately, powerfully. Someone who still speaks to you. He promised in the last days, and I believe we're living in those. I believe that he said real clearly that in the last days, God will pour out his Spirit on all flesh. Your sons and daughters would prophesy, your young men would see visions, your old men would dream dreams. The God of creation, the creative, the God of the Bible, he's still supernatural. A lot of the church has shut that part out. And that's why a lot of us don't want to be in those churches, because they've shut out not only truth, a lot of truth that's in the Bible and going on in the world, but they've shut out that God is still the same yesterday, today, and forever. He can still heal. He can still deliver. He can still change your life. But because I know that I'm going to have to give an account to a creator, to God, the one who made me, and that he has a standard that he wants me to live by. But that I can't keep that standard. Never can perfectly. So he came in the flesh, died on the cross to make a way for me to be forgiven, to be cleansed. There's so much evidence. If you want to know, listen, if you're a skeptic out there, or you're into Buddhism or Hinduism or whatever, or you're just, a New Ager and think it's about, meditation and visualization and feelings of peace and joy, you need to know God's not confused. The Creator's not confused. He didn't make 15 million different ways that contradict and go against one another to find Him. He made one clear way. And if He's able to create this perfectly domed, flat, wonderful place, He was able to preserve a book that revealed what He wanted revealed. The Bible foretold. This right here is Psalm 2. Psalm 2, the Bible foretold 3,000 years ago that in the last days, in the end, right before the wrath of God and the judgment of God, that there was be a great conspiracy, that world leaders and world rulers would gather together, and that conspiracy, that council, would particularly be against the Lord, Yahweh, the God of the Bible, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and His anointed, His Christ, His Messiah, Jesus Christ. Listen, you want to tick people off? You can talk about God all day long. Just say His name, Jesus. That's what they don't want to hear. But this is Psalm 2. And the Dead Sea Scrolls and everything proves that we had these prophecies long before they ever came to pass. Hundreds of years before any of them came to pass. It says, why are the nations in an uproar, in turmoil against God? Why do the people devise a vain and hopeless plot? The kings of the earth take their stand, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord, Yahweh, and His anointed, the Davidic king, the Messiah, the Christ, saying, let us break apart their divine bands of restraint and cast away their cords of control from us. But He who sits in the heavens, or sits enthroned in the heavens, laughs at their rebellion. The sovereign Lord scoffs at them, and in supreme contempt He mocks them. Then He will speak to them in His profound anger and terrify them with His displeasure, saying, yet as for me, I have anointed and firmly installed my king upon Zion, my holy mountain, and I will declare the decree of the Lord. He said to me, you are my son. This day I proclaim and have begotten you. He goes on to talk about the day of His wrath, about kissing the Son, lest He be angry with you. This prophecy foretold that there would be a great conspiracy, that world leaders and world rulers and kings would take counsel together, and that counsel would not be against Buddha, it would not be against Muhammad, it would not be against Allah, it would not be against Shinto, it would not be against any of these other religions, it would be against the God of the Bible, the Lord Jesus Christ, to hide Him from you. This is what they're against. This is what they hate. They want to keep you from Jesus Christ, finding Him. That's what they want to keep you from. God said He created a firmament and there's waters above. God said that it's flat. God said there's an above and there's a below. God said there's a heaven above and a hell beneath. God said there is a judgment day where we will all give an account. And that we better be sure that the blood of Jesus has washed our sins away and we've gotten serious with our Creator. The Bible's a flat earth book, but I want to tell you something else. The Bible is a Jesus book. The Bible is a salvation book. The Bible is a way for it to have eternal life book. It's not just about flat earth. It's to give you the truth and the clarity in a world full of deception. Not just NASA's deception, not just government deception, but religious deception. See, I want to tell you something. If you get the truth of flat earth, but you don't get the truth of Jesus Christ, you're going to miss it. You're going to be deceived by these Illuminati world rulers and this entire conspiracy. You're still going to be deceived. You're still going to miss the boat. It's the truth. The Bible foretold in the last days that there would be the uniting of kings to war against Jesus Christ. The book of Revelation chapter 17, He said there will be a beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. I can make that very clear that means the United Nations and where we're heading toward a world government. And the Bible tells you, we went to a prophecy in Psalms 3,000 years ago. This is Revelation 2,000 years ago. And he says the 10 horns you saw are 10 kings that have not received the kingdom, but for 1 hour will receive authority as kings along with the beast. They have one purpose and will give their power and authority to the beast. They will make war against the Lamb, that is Jesus Christ. But the Lamb, Jesus Christ of Nazareth, will triumph over them because He is Lord of lords and King of kings. And with Him will be His called and chosen and faithful followers. This is the war. It is a war not just over the true nature of creation or over our reality. It is over truth, and Jesus is the one. He said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Not a way, not a truth, not a suggestion. He said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one will come to the Father but through. You cannot have God. You say, oh, I found the Creator, I found God, but I don't know about Jesus. No. You can't. There's no way, other way. I know that's not popular, but I'm not here to win a popularity contest. Because I tell you what, if they kill me tomorrow, I'm gonna be a happy man. But what I'm saying is, I am going to stand before God, and I'm not going to have anybody's blood on my hand. But I want to tell you the truth because I just want people to go to heaven. I'm not trying to condemn anybody. I want you to be there with me. But there's a bunch of people out there that don't believe that there's a hell. They don't believe there's an eternal punishment, an eternal separation from God. And that's the cost. That's the cost of following Satan or following the lies, following deception, or just living for yourself, making yourself God. Some of you are making flat earth a God, an idol. And I'm not picking on you. Many preachers have made church and ministry an idol. They come before Jesus. Here's the scripture where it says that these men, these evil people in the world would withhold the truth of creation even though God has shown it to them. Romans 1, 18 through 22, and 25. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who hold the truth in unrighteousness. So these are men who hold or withhold the truth in unrighteousness, because that which may be known of God is manifest in them, for God hath showed it unto them. For the invisible things from Him, of him, rather, from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead being Father, Son, Holy Spirit, so that they are without excuse, because that when they knew God, they glorified him not as God, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. They changed the truth of God into a lie and worshiped and served the creature more than the Creator, who is blessed forever. So part of the deception, he tells us, is to withhold the truth. And we know, just like I pointed out a minute ago, NASA knows it's flat. They know they're lying. They know it. They know they found the dome. They know they found it. But they don't want us to know. They're hiding it. But here again, did the Hindu scriptures tell us this? Did Buddhism tell us this would happen? Did even the Quran tell us this would happen? No. Walter Cronkite, who believed the moon landing, or at least acted like he did, said we must strengthen the United Nations as the first step toward a world government. Georgia congressman said the drive of the Rockefellers and their allies is to create a one world government combining super capitalism, communism under the same tent, all under their control. Do I mean a conspiracy? Yes, I do. I am convinced there is such a plot, international in scope, generations old in planning, incredibly evil in intent. Now, why am I bringing this up? Because these same people are heading us in this direction. All of the deception is to get us to this point, and it is coming quickly. The mark of the beast, and he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, bond and free, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, that no man might buy or sell, save but he that had the mark or the name of the beast. You want to compare the Bible to other religions? Quran, whatever. You want to compare it? 2,000 years ago, said in the end, a world government would be pushing something to be implanted in your head or in your hand to control all buying and selling. You want to tell me the Bible's the same as other religious books? This is it right here. NASA and these people, this is where they're pushing us. Biochip implant. This is 2003. Biochip implant arrives for cashless transaction. Not too long ago, USA Today, after the company in Wisconsin pushed their employees to get chipped, USA Today writes this one, you will get chipped eventually. And I believe God is using, I'm getting the testimonies. So I'm getting the testimonies, emails, comments, YouTube. I'm getting the testimonies of people saying, once I saw the truth of the flat earth, I saw the evidence. It brought me back to the Bible, brought me back to God. I have testimonies from people leaving the ancient alien lie, leaving atheism, leaving agnostic, leaving scientism, and coming back to looking at the scriptures and looking at God. And so I'm all in.